Hi everybody, taking over from Mr. Davis. Wanted to just review really quickly before we moved on. Mr. Davis did a good job with sensory memory, talking about how it just kind of flashes in there. The best example of sensory memory is what Mr. Davis talked about, which was you hear somebody say something and you say, what? But it's still rattling around in your head for just a second. And that was also those letters that were flashed up on the screen. They're in your brain for just a second. So they're there and they're gone super fast. Now working memory, they'll stay in there. It's going to work, but you can only get about 7 things in there. That was what Mr. Davis was talking about with the phone number. So working memory is really where you got to do all that work to get stuff into long-term memory. And he talked about all these things are in working memory. You kind of have a boss in there, a switchboard operator doing all this stuff. You have the phonological loop, which is playing sounds over and over. And you have a sketch pad, which is, yeah, I don't need to get into it. It'll take me too long. But anyway, you have the sketch pad where your brain can kind of do some things in there. And then I'm not going to do this. We'll do it together maybe when we get a chance. But Mr. Davis had a good example where he was talking about how phone numbers are 7 digits long. And there's a reason for that. But there are also 7 digits with the dash in the middle. So there's 3 digits and then 4 digits. Why is there a dash? You don't put it in when you type in your phone number, so why is it there? Why are there parentheses around the area code and a dash in the middle of a phone number? Because we tend to remember things in chunks. If you try to remember 7 digits just randomly, that's hard. But if you remember 3-digit number and then a 4-digit number, what you've technically done is instead of memorizing 7 digits, you've remembered 2 numbers. One was 3 digits, one was 4 digits. So that's chunking. You're taking all this different stuff and you're chunking it together into chunks. A 3-digit chunk and a 4-digit chunk, and then your area code is another 3-digit chunk. So really you only have 3 chunks in a 10-digit phone number. Mr. Davis and I both showed you that, how many digits is it? It's 12. Now the reason we remembered it is because we chunked it together. Those are dates. The first date is December 7th, 1941, which was Pearl Harbor, date which will live in infamy. And then the second date is 9/11/2001. So we can remember, and I can go 120741091101 because I've chunked them together that way. They're not random anymore. I've chunked them together. The other one that Mr. Davis did, some of you may have already noticed, it was JFK, FBI, UPS, NASA. I don't remember the other one. But instead of remembering just random letters, we chunk them together so we can remember them that way. That is what chunking does. So what we need to do is find a way to take all this random information and put them into chunks. Okay, I love this. I read this book and we have it in our LC library and you should read it too. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein. It says the general idea with most memory techniques is to change. I will repeat, change whatever boring thing is being inputted into your memory into something that is so colorful, so exciting, and so different from anything you've ever seen before that you can't possibly forget it. So we need to do something. The work that I talked about, Mr. Davis talked about, getting things in your memory takes work. But if you get good at it and you get practiced at it, the work becomes less and less. So now we get into long-term memory. Now the limit of sensory memory was about 12. And it lasted a couple of seconds. The limit of working memory was about 7 plus or minus 2. And that lasts up to a minute. But if you don't get stuff from sensory memory into working memory and from working memory into long-term memory, it's gone. It's gone. So we have to figure out how do we get it into long-term memory. And I'm going to move this here because it says stores material organized according to meaning. I want you to think about your storage. Any storage you've seen. If you get new pieces of paper in class, and you're not getting them this year, but in previous years, did you have good storage? Did you have a file folder with little tabs in there? Because here's the most important part. If you have this nice little storage with all these tabs, then if I say, can you find that piece of paper for me from 2 weeks ago in this other class? You just go, boom, it's right there. That is not because you have a good memory, it's because you stored it properly. So when we talk about getting things into long-term memory and getting them back out, if you store it properly, you're going to be able to get it back out. Just like in your binder. If you don't store it properly, it might be in there, but you're not going to be able to find it. So when it says stored material according to meaning, you have to connect a new memory to something that's already in there. You have to have a shelf, a binder, something in there where you can say, I know where to put that. So now we're going to talk about different types of memory in your long-term memory, and later we're going to talk about how we really store things properly in our memory. So in long-term memory, we have something called procedural memory. Now think of procedures. Maybe when you were in elementary school, like my kids, you did procedures where they would say you had to write a procedure about how to make a grilled cheese sandwich in elementary school. And you go through step by step by step. That's procedural memory. You write it down in your notes if you're taking notes, which you should be doing. It's like riding a bike. If you said, can you tell me how to ride a bike? I'd say, not really. It's a procedure. It's something that I know how to do. Notice I have how bolded and italicized. What they find is there are a lot of people who have complete amnesia for everything in their lives. They can still not only remember how to do things, like play piano, but they can still learn how to do things, even if you tell them a word and 30 seconds later they can't remember the word. Because procedural memory is stored back here. We're going to talk about this in Unit 3. This is called the cerebellum. So that is a type of memory that is stored in a different spot. That is procedural memory. Then we have declarative memory. Think about when you declare something, you are saying it out loud. If you say the capital of Delaware is Dover, you have declared something. You're not doing something. You're not saying how to do something. It is a declaration. That is declarative memory, any fact that you have. So when you think procedural memory, if you're in band in school, you're probably doing procedural stuff. If you're in Spanish, you're kind of doing declarative stuff. So different types of memory stored in different parts of the brain. And we're going to talk more about, we've got the temporal lobes over here and the prefrontal cortex here. We're going to talk about that in Chapter 3. Stored in a different spot because it's a different type of memory. Then we have episodic memory. Again, as Mr. Davis said earlier, I thought it was a great thing. He said it, videos and videos ago. Most of these terms define themselves in the term itself. Think of episodes in your life. If I said, what did you have for breakfast this morning? That was an episode that happened. And if somebody said, was your first period teacher in class today? And if you said, yeah, I remember that. It's not how to do something. It's not a fact like the state capitol. It's something that happened to you. It's an episode in your life. If you remember what you did on your birthday, that's an episodic memory. If you remember what you did last Thanksgiving, that's an episodic memory. Again, that's a different type of memory. And then we have semantic memory. It's part of declarative memory, but it stores meanings of words and concepts. And this might be a little clearer if we look right here. So let's take a look. So long-term memory, all of these terms that I just gave you are under this umbrella. And then we have procedural. Notice procedural is all by itself over here. Motor skills. Motor meaning motion. So riding a bike, hitting a baseball. Operant and classical conditioning, we're going to be talking about that later on. Even people who have major brain damage and can't remember anybody's name for 30 seconds, you can train them using rewards and punishments. So keep that in your mind, in the back of your mind. We're going to learn about this later on. Now within declarative memory, declarative, I like that. We have two types. We have episodes, things that happen to you, and we have semantic. And when you think semantics, semantic, when you think of like language, that's what I think of when I hear semantics. So when things when you're talking about things semantically, that is stuff in your brain. So semantic is within declarative, that is stuff in your brain, facts, language, stuff like that. Episodic memory is also stuff in your brain, but it's like what you did for your birthday. So declarative is all stuff, and here we have two different types of stuff, facts and episodes. And over here we have skills. So I've talked for 9 minutes. It's time for Mr. Davis to take over.